In the final decades of the 19th century, the world witnessed the rising tide of industrialization, urbanization, and organized political resistance among the working classes. One of the most important developments in this era was the founding of the Second International. This transnational body was established to unify socialist, labor, and Marxist movements across the globe, offering a platform for ideological collaboration and international solidarity. The Second International officially came into existence in the year 1889 and continued to function until the early part of the 20th century, dissolving in the year 1916 due to internal conflict and the pressures of war. Its founding date, July 14, held symbolic value as it marked the centenary of the storming of the Bastille, a key moment in the French Revolution, and served as a rallying point for those who believed in revolutionary change and the empowerment of the working class. The Second International was born out of two parallel meetings held in Paris. Delegates from over 20 countries gathered to formalize cooperation between various socialist and labor parties. These gatherings were not spontaneous but emerged from decades of political thought and experimentation with labor organizing, syndicalist philosophy, and Marxist doctrine. The founding members of the Second International envisioned it as a successor to the First International, which had existed earlier in the century and had been deeply influenced by thinkers such as Karl Marx and Mikhail Bakunin. While the First International had fallen apart due to ideological differences between anarchists and Marxists, the Second International was constructed with the intent to maintain a broad front, at least in its early years, that could accommodate different strands of socialist ideology. Among these ideological strands, the anarcho-syndicalist movement played an influential role. Anarcho-syndicalism embraced the philosophy of revolutionary industrial unionism, or syndicalism, as the primary method by which workers could seize control of the economy. This approach differed markedly from state-centric Marxist views, as it did not emphasize seizing political power through parliamentary means or revolution, but instead sought to dismantle capitalist structures through organized labor action. The foundational belief of anarcho-syndicalism was the complete rejection of the wage system, which was described as a form of wage slavery. Proponents of this ideology believed that true freedom for workers could only be attained by abolishing wage labor entirely and restructuring society into self-managed cooperative economies. The syndicalist philosophy had a strong presence in countries with large working-class populations and powerful labor unions. Its focus on direct action, such as strikes and workplace takeovers, appealed to laborers who were often disillusioned by the slow pace and compromises of political socialism. While anarcho-syndicalism never dominated the Second International, its ideas significantly shaped the direction of debates within the organization and informed many of the actions taken by its member parties and trade union affiliates. Indeed, the labor movement more broadly was influenced by these competing visions of how best to achieve emancipation for the working class. The labor movement in the late 19th and early 20th centuries was not a monolithic entity but a collection of diverse and often conflicting ideologies and organizational strategies. In many countries, trade unions began as defensive formations to protect workers from exploitation. Over time, these unions evolved into more sophisticated political actors that aligned with socialist and workers' parties to demand reforms such as universal suffrage, the 8-hour workday, and improved labor conditions. The labor movement was particularly influential in Europe, where industrial capitalism had taken root most deeply, and workers were increasingly willing to organize and strike for their rights. In Britain, one of the most significant developments in the labor movement was the formation of the Labour Party. This political organization did not emerge overnight but was the result of years of collaboration among various groups committed to representing the working class in Parliament. Among these groups was the Social Democratic Federation. The Federation was one of the earliest socialist parties in Britain and had a strong foundation in Marxist thought. However, it was not solely responsible for the creation of the Labour Party. In the month of February in the year 1900, the Social Democratic Federation joined with other influential groups, including the Independent Labour Party, the Fabian Society, and key trade union leaders to form the Labour Representation Committee. This committee was tasked with selecting and supporting parliamentary candidates who would advocate for labor interests and socialist reforms. The committee's establishment marked a decisive shift from labor activism in the streets and factories to labor representation within the formal political system. The Labour Representation Committee eventually evolved into the modern Labour Party. This transformation was gradual but significant, as it represented the institutionalisation of Labour politics in Britain. Rather than seeking to overthrow the existing political order, the Labour Party aimed to reform it from within. This strategy appealed to many workers and intellectuals who saw the British political system as flexible enough to accommodate democratic socialism. Nonetheless, more radical elements, including some members of the Social Democratic Federation, viewed this parliamentary focus with suspicion and preferred more direct and uncompromising forms of struggle. While the Social Democratic Federation played a foundational role in the formation of the Labour Representation Committee, it is essential to recognise that the creation of the Labour Party was a collective achievement. Each participating group brought unique ideological perspectives and organisational strengths to the table. The Fabian Society, for example, advocated for gradual and peaceful change through education and policy reform, while the Independent Labour Party emphasised moral socialism and working-class culture. The trade unions provided the financial resources and mass membership necessary to sustain a national political party. Together, these forces forged a broad coalition that would eventually challenge the dominance of the Conservative and Liberal parties in British politics. Even after the Labour Party began to take shape, the Social Democratic Federation continued to operate independently. It did not dissolve into the new party but maintained its identity and continued to promote a more orthodox Marxist line. Over time, however, the Federation experienced internal divisions and declining influence. In the year 1911, it merged with other left-wing groups to form the British Socialist Party. This new formation represented an attempt to consolidate the Marxist left outside the Labour Party, but it faced many challenges, including state repression, limited electoral success, and competition from other socialist and communist factions. The story of the Second International, the Labour movement, and the formation of the Labour Party in Britain reveals the complex interplay between ideology, organisation, and historical circumstance. It also underscores the importance of cooperation among diverse actors in achieving shared political goals. The Second International provided a forum for international collaboration, but it was ultimately unable to survive the pressures of national conflict. The outbreak of the Great War in the early 20th century caused a rift between member parties, as many supported their national governments rather than maintaining internationalist solidarity. This betrayal of foundational principles led to the collapse of the Second International and opened the door to new forms of socialist organization, including the Third International founded by the Bolsheviks. The labor movement, too, underwent transformations in response to historical events. While it began as a movement for basic rights and protections, it grew into a powerful force for systemic change. Trade unions, political parties, and grassroots organizations all contributed to the development of a working-class consciousness that challenged the legitimacy of capitalist exploitation. The formation of parties such as the Labour Party in Britain demonstrated that workers could become a permanent and influential presence within democratic institutions.